You are listening to Real Men Feel with Andy Grant. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but all men can benefit from. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. You know, I don't think we realize how important healthy relationships are to us. They're vital for our mental health, emotional health, even physical health and happiness, and, really our survival. We are social creatures. We were not designed to be alone. And positive relationships can fill our lives with more happiness, success, support, encouragement, stability, trust, and just so much more. And poor relationships, or an absence of relationship, can really make our lives seem absent of all those good things. So today, as you may have guessed by now, we're going to talk about relationships. And my guest is GS Youngblood. He is a coach and author who's been involved with men's work for a dozen years. He has a new book called The Masculine in Relationship, a blueprint for inspiring the trust, lust, and devotion of a strong woman. So welcome to Real Men Feel, GS.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Glad to be here.
Cool. Yeah, I was checking out the reviews you have. You've got, it's like all 5 stars, and people are really praising how actionable this book is.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, I am so pleased with the reception that the book is getting. When I wrote it, it came from my direct experience of both doing it the wrong way and the right way in long-term relationship. And so everything I write about is something I went through myself. And so it felt real to me, it felt relevant to me, but to have men and women write me and say, wow, the men will say, wow, you really clarified a lot of things, this resonated. Or the women will say, wow, you really get us, and you really get the dynamic and what we're needing and what would light us up. So when I get those emails, I love it. It's very, very gratifying. Very gratifying end to 6 years of writing, and it was a long road.
Cool. So I wanted to ask you what got you to focus on relationships. So it sounds like it was your own wonderful experience with them.
Failure is my fuel and motivation, to tell you the truth. I was married for 10 years, and that marriage ended in a pretty horrible way. And by the end of the marriage, I was emasculated. I'm okay to admit that because it's true. And what that meant was I was just dancing around trying to stay out of trouble or keep her happy because it had gotten so toxic. And I thought that would make it better. Actually, that makes it worse. It really makes things a lot worse. And so I learned from that how to do it the wrong way. And then I spent the next 10 or so years in another long-term relationship with a woman who was very strong and very feminine. And through practice of, in relationship, I slowly started to learn the right way to do things. And also a lot of men's work with people like David Data and John Wineland and others in parallel to that. And all of those learnings I codified into the book, Masculine in Relationship. And so it's a very, very personal work for me. And as I said, the motivation was my failures.
And you talked about how you've gotten great feedback from both men and women, but the audience is intended to be men?
Yeah, this is mostly intended for men, but I will tell you, a few women, somebody wrote me on Facebook the other day, and she said, I'm reading your book because it's helping me give voice to what it is that I want and what it is I expect or need in relationship. And so even the women are interested, but yeah, it's primarily for the men.
Cool. And you mentioned that first marriage ending with you being emasculated. Did that happen through the course of it, or did it start in that energy from the beginning?
Well, it was over time. I'll admit, when children came, it sort of created a little more overcapacity in the system than we had, and it just over time. She would naturally have dissatisfaction about certain things, which is normal for any relationship. And I didn't know how to receive that. I took that as criticism. I took it as I'm not good enough, and I didn't have a sense of my own self-worth. And so I wasn't receiving her pain, and I take responsibility for that. Not that it was the only dynamic. It's always 50-50, but if you're not receiving your woman's pain, if you can't hear it, validate it, and make space for it, increasingly over time, she's going to turn up the volume on you. And most men, present company included at that time in my life, our responses are, number one, to withdraw and shut down. And the nature of your podcast, I know you get that and understand that. Worst of all, we get defensive. This is the granddaddy of all reactivity, is defensiveness. And if you want, I could go on and on about defensiveness, because I think it's such a core central issue. But these are the things that we do, and it leaves our women feeling abandoned. And it's very, very painful for them. And so over time, the couple will start to separate, even with just that single thread of a dynamic between them.
I mean, we're talking about primary relationships, mate relationships, man and woman relationships, but being heard and not taking things personally, I mean, these are, to master those takes you in great places for all relationships.
Absolutely.
Friends, family, business.
Yeah. You'll find yourself more, as soon as you master your own anxiety, which is at the core of our reactivity, and it's really at the core of any of our non-masculine behaviors, is this thing called anxiety. If you can learn to tame your anxiety, everything will change. You will be more successful at your job. You will be more successful in your friendships, and and more successful in your relationship first and foremost. And so, the question that listeners are going to have is, okay, great, sounds good. How do I tame my anxiety? And I go through a lot of this in the book. One of the chapters is on emotions, and I know it's become very much part of mainstream media that, hey, guess what, men, you have emotions. I think we're all starting to get that. Whether we've mastered it is a different story. But in my chapter on emotions, I really try to take it through the lens of building your masculine core. So I think I've got a little bit of a unique take on emotions. So getting in touch with that is step one. And of course, I know you know that, again, because of the content of your podcast here. But two is an embodiment practice. And this is the thing that a lot of men don't understand, is how a daily embodiment practice can really start to change your level of reactivity. Because, reactivity is it's listening to the stories in your head. You get an input, your woman's upset, for instance, and you have a story that pops in her head that she's being unreasonable, that she's being a bitch, that she doesn't respect you. Those are all stories. And as you stay in your mind, you react to those stories. And that's the core of reactivity. Whereas an embodiment practice teaches you to naturally have your attention down in your body. And for me, it's the number one thing that has changed my orientation in relationship is my daily embodiment practice. And just like guys go to the gym or go out and run, this is something you've got to do on a daily basis. One time won't help you. You've got to do it on a daily, consistent basis. And so in the book, I go into some suggestions for an embodiment practice. And this will definitely be an area of focus for me of sharing my own daily practice and the different types of things that I do and the reasons I do. So that's that, circling back, that's another path to taming your anxiety. And once you tame your anxiety in that moment, I call it the moment of choice. When you are presented with some stimuli, some input that is challenging, that moment of choice, if you have tamed your anxiety, you're going to be more present. You're going to be less reactive, and you're going to be more insightful. And your woman's going to feel you more. She's going to feel you there, and that's how she feels loved. Is when she's upset, she feels you more present and actually there with her.
Right.
So this is a really, really important topic. We could go on for hours.
Yeah. When you're not full of anxiety, when you're not just completely reactive without awareness, you can truly be responding to the issue in front of you, not an argument from 10 years ago or something that happened to you as a child. And
exactly. It's so true. And we all do it. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of the focus on that in the book. There's a whole chapter on anxiety and threat, which really tries to go to the root. Because what I don't want men to do is think that they've got to mimic behaviors or kind of will themselves to be a certain way. Like, don't even do that. That's just chasing your tail. You've got to go deeper down into the inner core where that you feel that sense of threat that gives rise to anxiety. And so I go through that and different examples of how that plays out, and really try to go to the source of these behaviors rather than just teaching men to copy them.
Right. Yeah, right. Because that's really just exchanging your existing mask for a different mask that you think will be better accepted by somebody, and it's still not you.
Exactly. And even, I think even more so in times of stress, you're going to lose it. You're going to regress back to your normal pattern anyway. So you can't, you just, in times of stress and challenge, you can't hold on to it for the most part, unless you're really embodied.
Cool. So you mentioned a couple terms that I want to get back to, and as you said, non-masculine behaviors, which is not a phrase that I'm familiar with. So could you kind of explain or define that?
Yeah. So the best way I can do it is to contrast it with what I'm describing in the book. So in the book, there's the thing I call a blueprint, and I talk about it on every single video and podcast that I do, because it's the framework I want men to understand. It's the framework that makes it actionable for them. So the blueprint has three parts. Number one, respond versus react. Number two, provide structure. And number three, create safety. So your question is, okay, what is a non-masculine behavior? Well, non-masculine behavior is when, number one, you're reactive. So reactivity can play itself out in many ways. You can be sort of fidgety, like physically, you kind of plays out, and you know those guys, they sort of move around a lot, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to us, let alone the women. They could talk too much or sort of incessantly, and they can get defensive, shut down, all the reactive behaviors. So those are all non-masculine behaviors when you're reactive rather than choosing your response. So that's one. Two, in contrast to the second element of the blueprint, which was provide structure. The opposite of providing structure is to just kind of asking your woman what she wants and then trying to give it to her, or trying to guess what she wants and then do that because you think that it'll make her happier and keep you out of trouble. And you're not actually providing any direction yourself that's tapped into your needs, your preferences, your boundaries. So to not do that is the nature of another non-masculine behavior. And then finally, create safety. If you're not being the provider, if you are not being the protector, and if you are not making her feel emotionally safe, which I go through in depth in the book, those are all non-masculine behaviors. And so again, not validate, your woman's upset and not validating her is going to make her feel unsafe. And the reason you're not validating her is because, she's upset and you kind of tense up and you go into your threat state and you haven't tamed that. And so then you get defensive, then you get reactive.
Right.
Those are all things that make her feel not safe. So those are the nature of different types of non-masculine behaviors that I talk about in the book.
All right. And when you speak of the masculine core, then is that being, is that having all those three plates in place? Yeah. So when you're living the framework, when you're responding, not reacting, you're providing structure, you create safety, that's the masculine core.
Yeah, that's my view of it. And what I set out to write in this book was something that's actionable for guys. We just it's like, tell me what to do, man. Tell me how to do this. And there's a lot of books out there that speak to masculinity, but I found that they fell into two categories. One was sort of fuzzy spiritual guide, which some people can really absorb it. I happen to enjoy those, but I also know that they're not fully accessible to the average guy. Mm-hmm. And then there's the alpha male books. It's like, be more confident, take charge, pick up your balls. And I just read that stuff and my eyes roll because it doesn't tell you how to do anything. So I really intended that the book be very actionable, and hence the blueprint.
Cool. And so you mentioned 6 years to write the book. Was the blueprint something that you stumbled on late in the process, or did you always have that? You had that masculine core, and then you're trying to structure how to get there for people, or how
I wish it had popped up early on. It would have made it an easier task. No, the process was it was really 10 years of taking notes and then writing, but 6 years of going at it with more intention. And I didn't know. I wrote down patterns that I saw every day, and I would send myself an email. And at some point, I literally had 400 emails in the folder for this. And so, over time, I began to see the themes. And over time, my desire to make it more actionable grew because I knew it needed to be very accessible. And so it was, a few years into the process before I even started to see this blueprint emerging. And then it fell into place. And then it really allowed me to focus the topic, the content after that.
And in your own experience or in clients you work with, has there been one part of the framework that has been more challenging than the other two to embody?
Let's see. No, they're all equally challenging. But what I will say is this: a lot of guys come in and they're in the mental mode, and for I have to focus on respond versus react. We have to go back to the drawing board, and I really have to get them to start to feel what it's like to be in their body. And that's hard because, you know, we're so mental. We go to work every day, we're thinking, we're making decisions, and it's hard to get guys to stop and get into their body. So that's usually the most difficult for me if I had to pick one of the three.
Yeah. Right.
But the reality is, you know, man, they're all tough, because when you're in that moment with your woman, and if she's a woman of substance, which most women are these days, it's really tough to embody these things. And so the guys can get it into sessions, but then they go and then they fail. But you know what? That's totally natural. It happens to all of us, including me. And you just keep at it.
So it's not a read the book, I'm all done, everything worked great. It does take some effort and perhaps years of effort.
Yeah, it really isn't. Yeah, men, please, you know, to your listeners, I say, please, it's more than just reading a book. You've got to do the embodiment practice, and you've got to do this, you know, over and over and over. And it takes time. It's going to take you 5 years of good effort to go from being kind of the normal semi-emasculated, you know, man to somebody who's really sitting in their own power. It's going to take a long time.
So you've mentioned women of substance and strong women. Is that all women or a subset of women? Like what is this? What is the strong feminine? What is a strong woman to you?
Yeah, I'll give you a broader answer, and then I'll answer the specific question after that. A lot of my motivation, and particularly the motivation for the title, came out of my men's group. I've got a pretty large men's group that I've done for a few years, and men come in and talk about their stories of just like, they want to be more in their power, but she just, you know, she's a force of nature. She just steamrolls and she gets really intense. And these guys just, they didn't know how to, you know, not get on top, but they didn't know how to go into a leadership position because she was just on fire all the time. And so that's today's woman. They're capable. They're in the workforce, more and more empowered, you know, and they're every bit as competent and capable as us at leading their life and a relationship. And so men are sort of, you know, a little bit afraid to step up. So that strong woman is somebody who knows what she needs. The strong woman is know that she deserves to be treated in a certain way. And is not afraid about stating that and asking that. And in my experience, that is a lot of the women these days, almost, you know, most of them, I would say. So those are the qualities of a strong woman. And it is, here's the core of it. In today's world, you know, because men and women there's more equality, you know, how does a man be in his power? And I think there's a false dichotomy that people sense, that it's like, okay, are you in charge? Am I in charge? It's like a zero-sum game in a lot of people's minds. So I intentionally wrote this book to have a model of masculine power that didn't take anything away from feminine power at all. So it wasn't about controlling. It was really about embodying clarity in your life and direction. So that's my hope for this, is that this is a model of masculinity that exists in today's Me Too world, in today's world of more gender equality. And it doesn't subjugate, it doesn't encroach in any way on feminine power. And so the two can now coexist in my view of things.
Cool. Yeah, that's the big question I had. So we're saying that a strong feminine kind of wants to be met by a strong masculine, and it's not about being in battle. It's about both being in their core, both being in their strength.
Yeah, exactly. Just imagine the man, he's with a strong woman and he shows up and he's grounded, you know, he can take her upset or her little jabs or anything like that and stays very present. Then he offers direction. So in the book, you'll see me use the tango analogy. You know, in tango, which I do, maybe not very well, but I do it. You know, the lead is not moving her body like, all right, we're going this way. What the lead is doing is opening and creating space, and it's an invitation for the woman to move through. And so it's leadership as an invitation as opposed to compulsion. So imagine the man that shows up and he's embodying those qualities that we talked about in the blueprint. None of that takes away from her, but she's going to feel great because that is him providing some leadership in the relationship.
And then also important to lead, be confident, take ownership, but also not to take it personally if all of your great suggestions for an evening are, and the woman says, nah, I'd rather do this.
Yeah,
or I don't want to go at all.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because that's a way that a lot of guys collapse because they have so much stake, and they start to identify their ego with leadership. And so when she says, yeah, that doesn't feel good, or that doesn't seem interesting, then they get a little hurt, and then you can collapse. And so I love that you said that, of like, oh, okay, baby. Well, actually, how about this? And so he just stays grounded and doesn't take her no as a rejection in any way.
Right.
And I'll tell you where that's most important is in sexuality. Her no, whether to sexuality overall or the fact maybe something in particular doesn't feel good, is a way that we really can get hurt and collapsed. And I've got a whole chapter on sexual leadership in the book, and we talk a little bit about that.
Interesting. Yeah, I know you've taken. You mentioned tango, and you take things from a lot of different places that kind of most books targeting men aren't taking from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff in my background and try to learn from all of it. I've learned from my Silicon Valley career. I've learned from the BDSM workshops that I've taken around that power dynamic energy and how do you play that in a healthy way into your relationship. And then tango's been a great influence as well. And the authentic relating stuff that I did a lot about 10 years ago.
Was it that breakup of the marriage that first got you digging into men's work, or were you all right? Yeah. So it did. So was that you had to feel the pain of your own?
Oh yeah, I did, and I remember very distinctly. It was a workshop with the authentic relating guys, and one of my early mentors, Decker Kunoff, was the first guy that showed me I had emotions, and I think I cried the entire weekend, but it was at the end of my marriage, so it was a tender time. But that was the fuel for me. There is nothing like a relationship ending to motivate you. And that's, I got to tell you, Andy, that's why I wrote the book. I want men to learn from my mistakes and my learnings and not have to go through what I went through. Yeah. And especially if they have kids and they're married. I don't want, if I can save, if I can help contribute to one family being able to repair and those parents staying together, like I'll feel like my work is done in some ways. And I see it all the time, especially with married with kids, because it's so stressful of having the kids. But you see it all the time. They're out and you see the couple and she has so much contempt for him, and he's just, he's dancing around trying to figure out how to not be in trouble. And it just breaks my heart, because that's a marriage headed for an end when a man just completely emasculates himself. I was at a volleyball tournament for one of my children, and I forgot the question I asked the guy, but I was talking to one of the dads, and he's like, yeah, I just try to stay in the background and let her tell me what to do. But he was talking about his wife.
Yeah.
And then I just shook my head. And I saw them later that day, and yes, she had contempt for him. I mean, it was so predictable. And so, men, please don't ever fall into the trap of, I got to go ask the boss. I just sit in the background and do what she tells me. Like, don't ever do that, because over time, she will become more and more disgusted with you. And you think you're making her happy, but you're not. You're killing her, quite frankly. So it's those kind of couples. If I can help those men, help them stand in their power a little bit, and you know what's going to happen? Their wife is going to turn back into the person they married. Remember when she was fun? Remember when she enjoyed sex with you? She was playful. Like, that woman is still in there, but she's beaten down by your lack of direction, by your lack of groundedness, and your lack of ability to make her feel safe. Mm-hmm. So, I say this over and over in the book. Men, you may or may not be the problem, but you are the solution. And the more that you change, the more that she'll change. Mm-hmm. So, you really have your fate in your hands here.
Right. Which is great news. You know,
It's amazing news, and it's scary because men say, "Oh shit!" Like, okay, what do I need to do? It's easier to retreat and kind of write it off and say, that's just the way she is. But yeah, so it's both an opportunity and a scary challenge for these men.
Because I think, you know, if someone has spent years trying to change their spouse, and well, that doesn't work. But when you realize, oh wait, it's me. Well, you know, you are the one person you can change. So that's what I mean. Like, well, that's the great news. You know, I do have, you know, I've heard lots of guys say, check with the boss, and I do whatever she tells me. And I always take it like these bad, sarcastic, jokey things. And I never think like, wow, how serious are they? Mm-hmm. And is that how they're really living? Because if that's not that doesn't feel good. It's not a happy, you know, it's just avoiding everything.
Yeah. And it's kind of sad because they say it and they chuckle and they sort of put on a face that they're being funny.
Yeah.
And inside they're dying. These men are dying because they feel so disempowered, and it's really, really sad. And so that, like, check with the boss is it's the tip of that iceberg.
Right.
Yeah. Mm.
And so in your experience, is every relationship salvageable? Or if a man realizes he's become just emasculated and has given up, does it mean he has to leave that relationship?
Yeah, this is more of a dilemma than a question I can answer. And what I mean by that is, look, guys, it's 50-50. No matter what you think or what she thinks, it's always 50-50. You both bring something to the table of the dysfunction. I encourage men to only think about their 50%. Like, don't worry about what she's doing, because the more you think about that, the more you'll just be waiting for her to change. Mm-hmm. So focus on your 50% and absolutely give everything that you can. And if you buy the book or buy a different book, you know, whatever your path, and really develop your masculine core and bring some leadership, and then she's still completely dysfunctional after a number of years of you really bringing it, being vulnerable, being in your power. If you do that for a few years and she's still not meeting you, then that relationship may not be salvageable. You may have to choose. But until you develop your masculine core and really bring it to the relationship and bring your leadership to the relationship, you don't know. Like, you can't leave a relationship unless you've really brought it all. So I think, Andy, the answer to your question is, you know, you've got to really develop yourself, focus solely on that, bring it to the relationship, and then see if that actually works. And if it doesn't over a number of years, then, you know, maybe you make a different choice. But until then, don't give up.
Right, because until then, you haven't given it your best. You haven't really given it a shot, even.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. You know, you mentioned that this wasn't for alpha dogs, and it wasn't just a fuzzy spiritual guide, but in your own journey, it sounds like you've kind of have explored both of those as ways to be or ways to learn from. Does that make sense? Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. I think let's see. So yeah, I have had a spiritual path, and it's meaningful to me, and is part of me opening. And so I love this question because I just realized it allows me to highlight something that is number one, is very important to me, but is sort of the center of my focus right now in my own life. You know, what men need to develop to be very compelling to women or your woman is both light and dark energies. Okay. So the dark energy is the part of you that can look at her and say, come here. You know, you can command her. And in a variety of contexts, you know, sexuality is probably the most obvious one, but having that ability to command her, and guys, you can develop that. Just go find a BDSM workshop. I'm happy to give recommendations, and go develop that energy where you can just absolutely take charge, and while you're connected to her, you are in charge. And so that's a dark energy. Women love that. I can tell you that 98% of the men have no capacity for dark energies. And I'm actually putting together a workshop on developing your dark energy, because so many men I know, you know, need to have that side. And it is not Me Too. It is not, you know, feminism embodied in a certain sense, because it's absolutely you having that dominance energy. But it's how you apply it that is important. So you don't just walk around in the world and start commanding people. It has to be very situational. So I've done a fair amount of that. I'll continue to do a fair amount of that going forward. So that's the dark energies. And then the light energies are more on the spiritual / heart path. And this is This is something that has taken me years to really tap into. And it's the core of my current practice here in this moment, is learning how to be more in my heart, to live for more from my heart. And most guys have no idea what that means, as did I a few years back. But this is, I'll give an example as a way of illustration. But your woman is upset with you, and she's, well, I'll say upset with me. And so one way I can go is I can get defensive, or I can be upset, or I could just like be the mountain that I think I'm supposed to be, the masculine mountain, and be very still. None of those are going to really help her feel safe. But if I can actually love her while she's being really bitchy at me, like she's being mean and she's being blaming and she's got her facts wrong and she's coming at me, if I can actually open and into my, I'm just sort of pretending I'm doing it by closing my eyes here, but feel my love for her and open my eyes and remind myself, no, this is the woman I love. And so I'm gonna be the bullfighter and sidestep. I'm gonna let all that energy go right by me, and I'm gonna stand right here and feeling my love for her. I got to tell you, Andy, this is starting to become the number one thing that allows me to be less reactive. So it's all the other things I talked about being more embodied and knowing my emotions. That's great. I'm going to put that aside. Simply feeling my love for the other person while they're upset with me allows me to really be much, much less reactive. And my last female partner, I mean, she felt it. She felt it when I was in my heart. And so this is something I'll write about more. I'm in the process now, so my words aren't I don't have the clarity yet that I want to explain it to other people. But I can tell you this will be in a future work and is a core part of my practice right now, being in your heart. So going back, that's the light energy, the energy of seeing the bigness of the universe through your spirituality, seeing, living through your love, even in the face of anger. That's the light energies. And I got to tell you, a man that can embody light and dark energies is absolutely compelling to women. And I've tested that with many, many powerful, tuned in women. And they all say the same thing. They just melt when they are with a man like that.
Yeah. The description of loving your wife when she's really like in your face and angry, to me, it feels like an exercise of unconditional love.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm bypassing what you're throwing my way and just remembering that. And
yeah,
because the way I explain this to people to get this is, if they have children, like your child can crash your car and destroy everything, but somewhere you're angry, you're fierce, but somewhere you still love them. And that's and when we can get that in a relationship, we can get that with a spouse, with a mate, that's truly where the magic really can happen. And that, if you can, even despite, I hate you right now, but I actually love you. And when you can be aware and have that dichotomy and not get trapped in just one aspect of it, or not get pulled down, and it's really energetic. It's being confident and grounded enough to stand in your power while someone else's power is really coming at you in an angry, directed way, and not to be swept away by that.
Yeah, I love the word that you use, unconditional love. That's perfect. So thank you. I'll probably use that. But yeah, and it goes back to that thing I keep talking about, the moment of choice. So she's coming at you. You have a moment of choice about how you'll respond. And what I've found is that if it's such a curiosity. Like, why do I get blown out when she's upset? Like, this is just a person in front of me. She's not trying to punch me in the face. Why do we always get so blown out, we men? And a lot of it is that somehow the stakes get so high in our head, and we don't even know it. This is all subconscious. The stakes, like, this anger must mean ... that she thinks I'm an idiot, or I'm incompetent, or doesn't respect me as a man, or is going to leave me, I think is what a lot of people have, that abandonment complex. And so, the stakes get so big, so therefore our reaction gets just as big. And, if somehow we can just take those stakes down, like, okay, I'm going to disconnect these stakes from her anger, because they don't necessarily, one does not mean the other. And so if we men, we can take the stakes down and just see her anger in this sort of absolute bubble rather than connected to these imagined consequences, I think it leaves us more present to then feel our love, to then be more present and be responsive to our woman.
Yeah. It's neat. This is making me think of being more of a witness, which is a big benefit I got from when I started meditation.
Yes.
I think I started in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed I was changing was the things that would trigger me often were emails, especially work emails. And I remember reading things like, "Oh, you fucking idiot. Why are all these people so fucking stupid? There's the same questions over and over. God damn it." And I'm like, wait, this is just scribbling on a screen. Why am I having this emotion reaction?
Yeah.
And over time, realizing I stopped having that reaction.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, and then I realized if these people didn't understand things, if people weren't writing to me, I wouldn't have a job. Like, so now I'm like, oh, well, thank you for not understanding that. Let me tell you for what feels like the 50th time, but I'll try again. Let's try a different way. And I took everything as an opportunity as opposed to everything being something for me to angrily react to.
Yeah.
But it's very much in line with what you're talking about here. But that was a way that I began to really see it in my life first. That.
Yeah, we all we project on other people's communications. I do this. This is actually something I just got in touch with in my last relationship, where we project onto other people. And I do it. I did it with my woman, and I've done it with work emails too. So I'm with you on that one. And we sort of, we project some intent on them, and then we react to that. And so the ability to not project onto other people, particularly our woman, if we come back to this context, don't project anything onto what she's saying. Just hear it in the moment, and you'll find that it becomes much less impactful and scary.
And unfortunately, like texting has become such a primary source of communication, and it is the worst. It is so difficult.
I hear you, brother. Yeah, I hear you, brother.
I have not met anyone that cannot. Everybody reads something into it that isn't there.
Right.
Or you're guessing at the intention. What did they put into this word? Or worse yet, you're trying to understand emojis and take that as, and people react and want to plan their future of their life based on like misreading an emoji, or even someone selected the wrong one, not what they meant it, and you're having a big brawl over an eggplant. Right? Yeah,
look, there's a painful resonance I feel with what you just said, because my last relationship was with a woman who lived 45 to an hour and a half away, depending on traffic. So text was a big part of our communications, and it's hard, man. Exactly what you said. It's hard. All you can do is handle your own projections. You can't handle the other person's, but men, just be careful on written communications. Be very, very clear, and don't be casual, because as Andy says, you never know how it's going to be taken, and it's dangerous territory.
Yeah. So I always tell people, if it's important enough, actually call them.
Yeah.
Like, use the phone for what it was actually first invented for. Because talking about masculine core, like that makes a man stand out. Well, he called me. That's just, I wanted, and you can butter it up, and like, I miss so much. I wanted to hear the power of your voice, but it's really to help you to not put the wrong things on it and take things the wrong way. But just, oh baby, I wanted to hear your voice again. I couldn't go another day, right?
Yeah, there you go. I love that. Very smooth. Yeah, especially when things get intense on the text and you start to feel them go sideways. Get on the damn phone, as you said. Yeah. You can cut things off early before they spin out of control on text.
Yeah. I find that the fewer of our senses that are involved in any communication, the more space there is for misalignment, taking things personally, going down the rat hole. And
great way to put it. Yeah, great way. I like that.
And earlier you mentioned being at the workshop towards the end of your marriage and being convinced that you had emotions. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to get back to that, and like, how real was that statement? Did you truly not believe you had emotions, or were you just didn't want to feel them while you were growing up, or what was that like?
Well, I was just deep into the business world and in a very intense job, and so it was just mental all the time. And I didn't have emotion really modeled for me that well as a younger man or as a child. And so I was just pretty mental. And so I would sort of logic my way through a lot of stuff. And, you're with a feminine partner. She feels that in half a nanosecond. Yeah. And it doesn't feel good. It does not feel good when you withhold. And I know you know that, again, because of the nature of your podcast here. And so, it's not that I didn't have emotions. I didn't know how to deal with the scarier ones like fear, shame, certainly anger. So Yeah, I started to learn, back at that time,
Yeah.
12, 13 years ago.
Yeah. That's what I find a lot if I work with a client and have them, especially a man, focus all that mental energy, gather it all, and then let it drop down into
Hmm.
their heart and
Hmm.
have amazing experiences. But there's this fear of, you know, I think all men know they have emotions, but there's definitely a fear of feeling the ones that they've been hiding, putting away. Perhaps we're taught they weren't masculine emotions to
Yeah,
begin with. Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think doing work with other men is really helpful for that, because you see another man doing it. It makes you
Yeah.
want to be more vulnerable. So
Yeah.
that, men, please get into men's groups.
Yeah.
Please do work with skilled facilitators, all of those things. You'll see that it's okay. And if you have a community of other men that are opening to that, then it's going to make it easier for you to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's where I'm always been impressed for the competitive nature of men
yeah,
when it shows up in men's group, when someone like admits to some scary thing,
yeah,
slowly and begrudgingly, and then I was like, oh yeah, me too. So
yeah.
we almost want to like, wait, I've had that too. And
Yeah, exactly. And practice with men rather than, trying to start off just with your woman, if it seems a little scary. But what you'll find is that it leads to a lot more capacity. And, men, I find a common misperception of men, and the beat in your emotion is like, they're just this sobbing and spits all over their face. And it doesn't have to be this thing where you're out of control and seeming, just not in, I guess, out of control is how I would describe it. Like, emotion can be really simple. And I think as I go through a bunch of things around expressing emotion, but the number one thing actually number one and number two is, number one, you never have to apologize or explain or defend your emotions. So if somebody tries to make you do that, just like, no, that's just how I feel. And it's really end of story.
right. Yeah. It's not a debate.
Yeah, exactly. It's just how I'm feeling, and I don't need to defend it. It may be irrational, but who cares? But the second one is, when you express your emotions, boil it down into two sentences, if you can. I'm seeing you do this, and it's making me feel X, or well, there's better protocols for that. But when you do X, I notice that I feel, dot, 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 and just leave it at that. And you don't have to go on and explain. You don't have to defend. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to run your mouth about for 5 minutes. Just boil it down and just put it out there, and then sit back in your grounded state and see what happens. That's all it has to be. Really all it has to be. And a protocol that I will give you is the work of Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication. He's very good at boiling it down to a protocol that is pretty defensible, and is really based on just what you observe and then what you feel based upon that. And it completely strips away any kind of projection or story or kind of guessing or assigning or labeling an orientation to the other person. It just talks about you. So it's almost 100% defensible in that regard.
And one other tip I'd give to people, not just men, but people kind of maybe exploring their emotions for the first time, is a thesaurus. Because if you haven't felt it, you might call everything anger, or you might be calling everything sadness. And talk about, and the fear is, I'm out of control, I'm just sobbing, and I find that's more likely the longer you go denying expressing anything.
Yeah.
But every life has loss and grief and sadness and excitement and joy and happiness. And if we limit one end, we limit the whole thing.
Yeah. And hearing you say that, I just wanted to share one more thing about my own journey, and where I literally am right now in my own development is, there's this phrase, a man of depth, that I don't know, there's something that I guess when I die, I'd like people to say that about me. And I've been trying to figure out what that means. And a big part of it is what you just said, Andy, in a slightly different way, but to be able to hold all the joy, along with all the heartbreak, the anger, the shame, all the painful shit, and to actually, instead of trying to protect yourself from all the hard stuff, of actually just step back and let it all in, and be able to hold it all, and like be able to love someone and also feel incredibly pissed at them, or feel the hurt because they've broken up with you, even though while you still love them. And can you get big enough to hold all that in? And I know this is where it starts to get, fuzzy and spiritual, and I'm okay with that. But that is, it's that level of capability to hold all the extremes of life and the emotional extremes of life that I think creates a real man of depth that is very compelling to women.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are fuzzy and spiritual. We just are. Now, some people discover that and they kind of try to live just there, and then that makes for a rough life.
Yeah.
Yes. And also, I'm an alpha dog, and that's all I am. And no, I don't need spirit, and I'm not anything except this bag of muscle.
I'm in charge.
Yeah. And if you don't like it, I'll kill you. Right? To take it to the really extreme. And that doesn't lead to a happy life either. So it we are and can be both and everything in between.
Yep.
And to go back to dance, I've never tangoed in my life, but that's the dance of heart and brain, of power, of leader, of stepping back, of spiritual, of grounded. It's all a dance.
Yeah, and what you said goes back to one thing I was mentioning, the light and the dark. You got to have the spiritual and I won't say alpha. I hate that term because it has such connotation, but it's that dominant energy. You got to have them both. That's the secret. And a lot of men say, do I just need to be an asshole to date beautiful women? Because I see these guys and they're real dicks. But they're with a beautiful woman. Is that what I need to be? And it's like, no, that's not. And the reason is because, sometimes some beautiful women are with a man who's, he's an alpha, but he's a dick, because that's a man that lives by his own code, and they'll put up with the dick part of him to get a hit of a man who lives by his own code. So, for you men, how can you extract that one piece of his energy, which is living by his own code, and then couple it with caring and a real heart? That's the light and the dark energies. It's that combination that you want, just like Andy says.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the asshole, the alpha, there's one term I'm surprised you haven't talked about that I do want to bring up, because it's really hard to have a discussion of masculinity without it, but that's toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. So is that kind of just the same? Like some people react and think, oh, that term means all masculinity is toxic. And that's not how I take it at all. It's just an extreme. So if you're a dick, if you're an asshole, that's toxic masculinity. Yeah. It's going too far in anything, but I wonder what your views are.
Yeah. Toxic masculinity and alpha dog, to me, are equivalent. The alpha is somebody who they're in charge, and it's often because they're, bigger, stronger, smarter, more, richer, more powerful, like they're in charge for a reason. It's not that they haven't necessarily earned it in a certain way, but they do it by compulsion, by dominating over other people in a way that's domineering. That's very different than a man that rises to the top because he leads, he provides clarity, and he brings other people up. And there's a caring about the we here rather than just the me. Yeah. So toxic masculinity is dominance with no heart. And I like that. But that's the thing. Then people think, oh, dominance equals toxic masculinity. It's like, no, dominance with no heart. And of course that requires a lot more explanation, but I think you get what I mean.
Yeah. No, I do.
So it's dominance with no heart that is toxic masculinity. And so you can actually still be dominant in certain ways. It's just that you have to couple, number one, with context. You have to bring it in the right context. And it has to be a chosen context by both people. And you have to couple it with the heart. And so that's a very big difference there. So you can still develop your dominant energy and bring it out at the right times, as long as you've coupled it with heart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. That the whole alpha mentality that's permanently on is, they can't be second to anyone. And I find that's driven more by an unaddressed wound. A fear is driving that, as opposed to, again, like I believe, all people are capable of rising up and leading in the right circumstances at the right time.
Yeah.
But yeah, if any man is the person that I must always be in charge, I must always be leading, then there's something you're afraid to look at. That's requiring that.
And in relationship that gets old. So guys, you look across the room and you see the hot woman with the alpha guy. But more likely at some point she's going to get tired of that,
Yeah.
and it's going to leave. And so, you need to see the end of the story to see how it ends to really get true context for what's happening here.
Yeah.
You want to meet your listeners want to meet a beautiful, capable, substantive woman who wants to stay with them over the long term. You don't want to fool her into it. And so you've got to make this sustainable. And you do that by coupling, your strong dark energies with the light energies.
Yeah. Cool. So you mentioned that this book really comes from your own experience and your own growth and journey. And I get that it is a blueprint. It's full of actionable items. I wonder if there's a habit, a practice, or a program, a book that you've read that really helped you the most and would like to share.
Well, I can comment on those two separately. So there's practices and then there's books. I think every man already knows my recommendation, but my friend Robert Glover's book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, is a great one. Of course, David Data's book is awesome, and I think most readers know that. It's Way of the Superior Man. I mean, that's the book in this space. But there's other ones. Go back to Sam Keen, Fire in the Belly. That's a great book. I really like that one a lot. In terms of practices, though, this is way more important than reading a book. I tried for about 10 years at first to meditate, and I literally could not force myself to stay on the cushion. And then it was something about the last 5 years where I started to do even deeper men's work and got into communities that people were doing a lot of these embodiments, so meditation and breathing practices. And so just seeing everybody else in this community so dedicated to it kind of just pushed me a little bit to get more dedicated. And so I have a morning practice that I do. I run through a specific protocol, and it involves breathing, movement, and meditation, and some other variances. I have a lot of different variety to my morning practice. It's the number one thing that's made a difference for me. And I can say that I'll just pause for dramatic effect. Number one thing, guys. And so, but it has to be interesting. So in my coaching, I coach guys how to develop their own practice and do it in a way that allows them a shift from when they couldn't really get into it. If you just sit on the cushion and just try to meditate for 15 or 20 minutes, it's pretty boring and monochromatic, so to speak. So I try to teach a protocol that has some variety, has some structure. It actually keeps you more focused. But it'll have a huge effect for you across all aspects of your life. And so I can't recommend a breathing, meditation, and movement practice enough.
Cool. And GS, I wonder, you talked about more writing, and this, I know that this work doesn't end until you end, I guess. Yeah. But what are you looking forward to?
It's a big question, Andy. Two things. I don't know if I want to admit the second one. This heart work that I've mentioned is really important to me, and there's an epiphany that's waiting for me, and I'm slowly, the light is going on, but I know at some point I just feel like something's going to click for me in this, and I'm going to become bigger than I've ever been in my entire life. And this is really deep practice, deep work that I'm doing right now on the heart side of things, to couple it with, other aspects of my persona. And so I'm deep in that right now, and it feels good. It feels like the right place for me. Cool. I think I'm like a lot of your men in the world, and we want to be truly met by a woman. We want to be with somebody that truly meets us, and that is something I desire just like every other man. Whether you're in a relationship or not, you're still longing for it. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot. But I feel that longing. Cool.
Well, yeah. I hope you alleviate that longing, find a solution to the longing in the best way. Yeah. Cool. Well, GS, I want to thank you for your time today, and thanks for everyone for listening. But how can people find you, get more information, and is the book available everywhere? Or
yeah, just get on Amazon and you can buy it. So a number of things. Number one, I hope people buy the book. I think it's helpful. Number two, you can check out gsyoungblood.com. I've got a lot of videos, and you can hear other conversations and hear me go into things. Over time, I'll have premium content that's going to be added to that site where you can go deeper. And then three, get on I have two Facebook pages. One is a group page, and then one is my sort of public persona page. And what you'll see is new content is pushed out there. But on the group page, very soon I will start putting reader question or client questions in there, things that people have asked me, and then I'm going to share my answer, and then you guys can post questions, and as best I can with my time capacity, I'll answer those questions. So, let's get a group of men who are in relationships supporting each other. And that's different from the larger sort of men's groups that are out there. This is specifically about, hey, I'm in a relationship, it's challenging, and I'd love some support. And you can get the support from other men or from me.
Cool.
And then, of course, coaching as well. I'll do a shameless plug. If you want to go deeper, reach out.
Excellent. So I'll have links to everything that's been talked about, all the books that have been recommended and mentioned, as well as links to GS's info, his book, the Facebook pages. Just visit realmenfeel.org, the blog post for the show. In the show notes, we'll have links to all of that. So thanks again, GS. Thanks for doing your work, and thanks for sharing it with everybody, because it takes both to make the world of men a better place to be a man in, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I really appreciate having you on, and it was a lively conversation that I really enjoyed. Thank you.
Beautiful. And thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm sure you took away some nuggets, and most importantly, put them into practice, right? Don't just take the information, make a change in your life, make your life better, and be proud to be a man. Until next time, be good to yourself. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Contact us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel.